Hey, Lance here. Thank you for buying the tree generator that I recently released. And if you're looking at this video, you're probably wondering how to use the tree generator. So in this video, I'm going to show you the process of creating a simple tree like this. So to begin, let me just hide away this tree and create a brand new one. So create a plane, and let me just turn off the ground as well, and go into edit mode of the plane and delete all the geometry so that we have an empty object. And I'm going to name this tree2, okay, and create a new geometry node and call it generator. Okay, we don't need the geometry input, so get rid of it. And for now, let's just get rid of the input as well. Let me just go to the asset browser, and here we have the tree nodes. We have a bunch of nodes here. Okay, now if you don't know how to use the asset browser, then you can look online for some tutorials. There are plenty of asset browser tutorials already, so I'm not going to go into the details of how to use the asset browser. But anyway, we have all the assets we need here. And in the geometry node, the assets will appear as the menus here. Okay, so the first node I want to show you is the single tree node. This node will create a simple tree like this. Okay, here we can change the direction of the tree, the height, as well as some other things. For now, this radius value set the same radius for the entire trunk. So we need some variation for the radius. And to do that, we have a utility node called variation along branch. Basically, the trunk is also considered a branch. So this node, although it's calling variation along branch, it's going to work the same for the trunk. So let's connect this to the radius, and right off the bat you can see we have a variation of radius from the bottom to the tip. And this maximum value control the maximum radius of the tree, and here we have the minimum. We also have this variation, which is pretty much the randomness. So set this to 0 for now. And let me increase this to something very big to show you what's going on. Okay, here you can see that we have a linear transition from the max radius to the minimum radius. And we can change this linear variation into something else using the custom profile. And to do that, we need to create a branch profile node and connect this to the custom profile. And here we can drop a float curve to control the profile, something like that. There we go. So here, using this technique, you can have a lot of different profile for the radius. For this tutorial, I think the linear profile is gonna work just fine. So I'm gonna set this radius to, let's say, 0.25. So we have like a trunk of 0.5 meter at the bottom and 0 at the tip. But I think 0 is a little too small, so I'm gonna set this to 0.02, like that. Let me just control the geometry a bit. So I'm gonna increase this to, let's say, 50, and the X resolution to something like 24. Now let's increase this to 60. Alright, now that we have the tree trunk, it's about time we start making it a little more interesting. So in reality, the tree trunk kind of never goes straight up like this, but it's kind of split like that. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is to split the trunk. So go to processor node and create a split branch node. And here we have like one level of split. You can increase the levels to split the trunk multiple times. So here I'm going to use 5 level of splitting, and I can change this seed to control the randomness of the split. And I can also change the split angle like that. Now you can change this direction to change the splitting a little more, but for me I just change this seed to get some random direction. Alright, and we have this min and max value to control the position of the split. And the next processing node that I want to use is the random attraction node to make the tree kind of curve randomly. So drop in a random attraction node and increase the strength as well as the scale. Now let's zoom in here and look from the bottom. You can see that the trunk is perfectly round, which is not right. So we need to create some roughness for the tree. It's gonna be the bark roughness node. Let me set the Z offset up a little, like that, and maybe reduce the scale. I mean the size of the noise. And finally reduce the strength to something lower. Okay, we have a much more realistic looking tree. Now a lot of trees in reality kind of twist a little bit. So we need to drop in another processor node called twist branches, like that. And we can increase this a little bit to twist the tree like so. Now this entire group will create this tree here, and this entire tree is considered the same branch level 0. Next, we will distribute some branches onto this tree using the distribute branch node. The branches that were created using this node is considered the level 1 branches. And let's go in here and have a look at the parameters. We have from level and to level. These control the levels of branches that this node is going to be distributing the branches on. All right. But for now, we only have the trunk, which is the level 0, so the 2 level is kind of irrelevant for now. All right, let me set the resolution for the branches. Let's set this to 8. Okay, and let's view the entire tree. Here we can increase the begin to force the branches to grow at a certain height level. So I'm going to increase this to something like that. And maybe increase the density of the branches a little. Okay, let me just ignore all the other parameters for now and go down here. Now we have this length parameter that controls the length of the branches. For now, all the branches kind of have the same length, so we need some variation for the length of the branches. And again, we're going to be using this variation along branch node. So create the variation along branch node and connect this to the length input. For now, we are using the relative size. So these numbers are going to be relative to the parent. So the longest branch will have 100% of the trunk, I mean the 100% length of the trunk, and the shortest branch will have 0%. But we don't want that. We want some different length, like so. And we want the lowest, I mean the shortest branches to be something like that. Now let me just turn on this absolute size, which basically use absolute units for the length of the branches. So the longest branches will have the length of let's say 0.5 meters, and the shortest branches will be 6 centimeters. All right, so I want the longest branch to be a little longer, like that, and the shortest branches to also be a little longer, like that. Okay, next I want to set some radius. Now I'm using absolute radius, so this is gonna set the radius for the branches in meter unit. So if I set this to 1, then the maximum radius of the branches will be 1 meter. However, the branches cannot be bigger than the parent, so we need to lower something like this. All right, and the tip should be 0, or maybe 0.01, which is 1 centimeter. And let me change this seed to control the randomness a little. Now we can increase this variation value to have some variation for the length of the branches, and we can also increase the variation for the radius. However, this is wrong, so let's turn on the per branch randomness. So each branch will have a slightly different radius, like so. Before we continue, let's go ahead and rearrange our node a bit. This group here is gonna be the level 0, so create a frame and call it L0 and drop all of these nodes in here and create another frame. This one will be level 1, so call it L1 and drop in these branches here. Now we need to process these branches similarly to how we process the trunk. So the first thing to do is to drop in the split branches node and split the branches like, let's say 5 times and split by 45 degrees. Okay, that's good. Alright. And next we want these branches to have a curve to the sky like that. So we have one node for that, which is the vertical attraction. And we set this to something higher than 0, we will have the branch pointing to the sky. And if we set this to something lower than 0, the branches will point to the ground. So let me set this to 0.25. Now, you probably noticed that these nodes only affect this level. So yeah, pretty much all the processor nodes kind of affect the last level of branches only. So you can't control the trunk using this node, okay? If you want to control the trunk, you have to use the nodes before adding the level 1 branches. Next, we want some random curvature for the trees, the branches. So again, we will use random attraction to introduce some randomness for the branches, and again increase the strength and increase the size of the noise. Alright, and change the W to control the randomness a little. Right now all the branches kind of growing at a certain angle from the parent, and I want to introduce some variation for this angle as well, which is this down angle here. If we set this down angle to 0, then the branches will follow the direction of the parent. If we set this to 90 degrees, then the branches will grow perpendicular to the parent. And we can increase this all the way to 180 degrees. But we need to introduce some variation for the down angle. So again, use the variation along branch and connect this to the down angle. And let's say the lowest angle should be 15 degrees and the highest angle should be, let's say, 70 degrees. This is the before and this is after. It's a lot more realistic, right? Okay, so this is the level 1. We need to add another level of branches, so it's going to be the level 2. So yeah, let's select this whole group here and duplicate it. Connect this to the tree and rename this to level 2. Okay, and let's see the result. These branches are growing from level 0 to level 4, so it's gonna be growing on the trunk as well, which is wrong. I only want these branches to grow on the level 1 of the tree, so I'm gonna set this to grow from level 1 to level 4, and I think these branches are a little too much. In this case, let's just use the relative size and set this to 0.5, and this should be 0.2. Okay, and set the radius to 0.5 and 0.1, something like that, and get rid of the variation. Maybe I should get rid of this variation as well. And for the level 2 branches, let's set the down angle to, the maximum down angle to 50, and the minimum down angle should be something around 5 degrees. Okay, and let me just reconfigure the resolution a little. This should be 5 or maybe 4 because these branches are very small, and reduce this to 10. Okay, let's move this forward a little so that the children branches kind of grow toward the tip of the parent branches, like that. And let's increase the density a little. We can always go back here and change this seed to get another tree. like that, and I think I like this more than the other. Now we have enough branches already, so it's about time we add the leaves. And I already prepared this collection of leaves, so let me just show you the leaves. Okay, these are the leaves. Alright, let's import the leaves into the geometry node. And here we have an import collection node, and we can select the paper mulberry leaves here. Okay, and create a distribute leaves. There we go, and connect this to the leaves. Okay, let me zoom in here a little. Zoom in a little more, and as you can see, we don't have a lot of leaves, and the distance between the leaves are a little too much, so we need to increase the density a little. There we go, maybe even more, 25. Okay, but as you can see, the leaves are growing a little too much on even the big branches, so we need to limit the growth of the leaves. Let me zoom in here a little. We have this min branch radius and max branch radius. So let me just go in here and lower this value, the max branch radius value, to something very small. So now, as you can see, the leaves will only grow on branches with the radius smaller than 1 centimeter. I can even lower this some more, like 0.08. There we go. And since we have a lot less leaves now, we can go ahead and increase the density of the leaves. But let me just look closely at these leaves, and let's take a look at the distance between the leaves. So the distance is still a little too much, so I need to increase the density a little. Let's say 35, and you can see the leaves are a lot closer together. Now, the leaves kind of growing randomly around the branches, and I don't want that, so I'm gonna reduce this random revolution to 0. So now you can see that the leaves are growing at the same angle. And I can increase this revolution to 0.5 to force the leaves to grow on either side of the branches. Alright, and I can increase this z up value to 1 to force all the leaves to face the sky. But yeah, this is a little too much, so I think it should be something around 0.5. Now it's time to introduce some variations for the leaves. So create a variation along branch again, and put this into the down angle, like so. And this should be something like 45, no, 15, maybe this should be 60. Okay. And another variation for the size, it's gonna be from 0 to 2. Okay. Now, as you can see, the viewport is a little slow because Blender at this point is not very good at rendering a lot of instances in the viewport. So let me just go to the spreadsheet, and we have about 100,000 leaves. So let's render. So as soon as we switch to Cycles rendering, the performance improved a lot. We need a lot more leaves, but increasing this leaf density is not going to work because we don't have enough branches. So we need to split the branches a little more. Let's go all the way back to the trunk and split the trunk a little more, maybe 6, 7 times, and split these branches even more. And I think the the level 1 branch should be a little smaller at the tip, like 0.002, and a little smaller at the root as well. There we go. So now we have a lot more leaves. So let's see the rendering, and let's turn on the ground. Now I need to add some material for the tree, so create another processor node. It's gonna be the set tree material, like so. And I already have this oak bark material here, and we also need to set materials for the cap. Let's temporarily remove the leaves, And here you can see that we don't have any material for the cap, so we need to set the material for the cap as well. And here I already have a simple brown material for the cap. Just leave it as that because we're not going to be able to notice that. Okay, let's view the leaves. And as you can see, we have a very nice tree here. Alright, looks like we have some problem here. And I think this is because we have a little too much variation for the level 1's radius. So let me just get rid of this variation. Okay, let me increase this begin to 0.3 so we don't have a lot of small branches down here. And let's make these a little fatter. Okay, I think the leaf density is a little too high, so let me set this back to 25. And let's wait. There we go. Let me just go back here and tweak these branches a little more. I think the top branches here are a little too short, so I'm gonna set this to be something like that. Okay, that seems to be a lot better, and the tree seems to be a lot more realistic. But let me just go back here and find another seed. And for the second level branch, I mean the level 2 branches, let's set the vertical attraction to something lower than 0, like minus 0.2, for example. So as you can see, the viewport is very slow. So yeah, Blender is not very good at displaying a lot of instances in the viewport. So we need to convert this to real geometry. We have this tree to object node. This will convert the tree into a regular object and turn on the realize instances. Alright, now the tree has 6 million faces and the viewport is a lot faster. But the downside of this technique is that it's gonna consume a lot more memory. But yeah, I have a lot of memory, so I don't really care. Alright, now that we have the tree with 6 million faces, it's gonna be quite a problem if you want to scatter this tree onto a landscape like this. The 6 million polygons repeat all over the place. It's gonna totally destroy your viewport. So before we can scatter the tree, we need to optimize it for the viewport. We have this node here, optimized for viewport. And let's create this node and drop it here. And let's wait. Alright, it's gonna convert the tree into this point cloud here, only for the viewport. Alright, when you hit render, it's gonna be the same tree, but in the viewport it's gonna be displayed as the point cloud. Alright, the next thing I want to show you is how to scatter the trees onto the landscape. So here I already prepared a bunch of grass here. Alright, so I'm gonna show you how to scatter these grass clusters as well as the trees onto this landscape. But yeah, I think this landscape is a little too big, so let me just go to the geometry node and make the landscape a little smaller so that we have some better performance. Okay, first let's create another plane and call this scatter. Okay, and put this in here, go to edit mode and get rid of the geometry because we don't need any geometry. Okay, create another geometry node and call it scatter. Okay, and we will import the ground like so. And here we have this scatter object node. We're gonna put in the geometry and we will import the collection of the grass as well as the trees. So first let's import the grass collection and scatter the grass. And as you can see, it's extremely easy to do. You can increase the density here, like 20 or 1. And you can turn this on to have a more uniform kind of scattering. Let's say 20, maybe 40. As you can see, we have a lot more uniform scattering. But for the grass, I think it's better to just use a true random kind of scattering. And let me just reduce this to 25 more, or maybe just 10. You can also play with these parameters, for example, the minimum scale as well as the max scale. Let's set the maximum scale to 2 and the minimum scale to 0.25. And let's see again. We have a lot more natural looking grass. I think 2 is a little too much, so set this to 1.5. There we go. We have a lot better looking grass. Alright, next I want to scatter the trees. So let me turn back on this tree here. This tree is still a very high poly tree. So I need to optimize this tree as well, and Blender is freezing. Alright, it's about time I activate the optimize for viewport for this tree as well. It's gonna turn into point cloud. Okay, the two trees are now displayed as point cloud, and I can scatter this onto the ground. So I'm going to create another scattering node. There we go. And this time I'm going to import the tree collection. And let's wait for the tree to be imported. And connect this to the instances. And this is a little too much, so set this to like 0.1, 0.05. So you can have a sense of density for the trees, but you don't have to wait forever for the viewport to update. But yeah, I think this is still a little too much, so maybe I should use Poisson disk. And let's set the distance mean to 4 and 0.01, no, 0.02. Okay, this is better. We don't have a camera, so let me just create a camera real quick and set the camera like so. And let's test the rendering. And there we go. As you can see, using the tree generator nodes, you can effortlessly create a bunch of high detailed trees and scatter them onto the landscape, all within just a few minutes. Okay, that's it with the video. This is just the basic workflow on how to create the trees as well as scattering the trees. In the future, I'm going to make some more videos and show you how to create some more complex trees as well as controlling the shape of the trees. Alright, if you're interested in using my tree generator nodes, then please consider buying them from my Gumroad store or my Blender Market store. I'll leave the links in the description. Thank you. I'll see you next time.